Hey everyone, Sarah Strackhouse here with RNCN, and we are live with Dr. J. Right now, we are with Dr. Alfred Johnson, who is the founder of Johnson Medical Associates. Thanks so much for joining us. Yeah, of course. So today we are talking about allergies, and I feel like it's that time of year where I constantly have a scratchy throat or my nose is itching and I'm constantly frustrated. Can you talk to me a little bit about what kind of allergies people might be seeing right now?
Right now is mountain cedar time. And here in Texas, mountain cedars December, January, February, and then when the wind picks up, it stirs up the outside molds. And of course we get wind from the north, which is pretty clean this time of year, but wind from the south brings in molds because the ground's not covered and it stirs up the molds. And then we have, of course, Cedar Hill south of us, which is the mountain cedar, and so we get mountain cedar influx into the Dallas area.
So is there any way to kind of combat getting, that itchy throat and the stuffy nose and all of those kind of funky feelings from the allergies?
Well, the one way is stay indoors as much as possible. Make sure your air filters are clean in your home, and you have the more efficient ones. When you're outside, keep your windows rolled up. Traveling in the car, turn on the recycle button if you have that for your car, so you aren't pulling in the outside air. And then from a medical treatment perspective, antihistamines help with that. So you can use antihistamine eye drops, oral antihistamines, the non-drowsy type, probably work best. Benadryl really works well at night, or one of the more drowsy antihistamines, because it helps you sleep if you're having trouble sleeping as part of the allergy factor.
So I have a basic question, but you always hear the difference between allergy and allergens. What exactly are allergens?
Well, allergens is the substance that you react to. Okay. Allergy is describing what a person experiences from those allergens.
Okay, and a lot of times we're kind of talking about, you talk about allergies as being seasonal and having different kinds of, allergens in the air and everything like that. But another type of allergy that we were talking about previously was, from foods or different types of chemicals that were in your house. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about the different types of allergies rather than just seasonal?
Most definitely. Let's talk first a little bit about seasonal so we understand the differences. Okay. Seasonal are pollens that are produced by outdoor plants that occur seasonally. So whether it's a grass, which is in the spring, or flowers, which of course bloom in the spring and then some in the summer, or weeds, which occur mainly in the fall. And then molds occur year-round, and then we have trees that are part of that are spring and fall trees. Plus we have here in the south the cedar, juniper type things, which occur more in the winter months, as we just talked about. The other allergens are indoor things like dust mites. And dust mites are little creatures that live off your skin flakes. Mm-hmm. So they're more prevalent in the bedroom since you spend more time in the bedroom, and can cause all kinds of problems with itchy eyes, nose irritation, throat irritation. Some people even get asthma from it.
So how do you combat that? Is that just, being clean, and taking some sort of cleaning device to whatever you have to the ground, or is there something else that you can do to kind of combat those dust mites?
Well, the best thing to do is wash your sheets frequently. And if you really have severe dust mites, then change your pillowcases out on a daily basis. They have dust mite covers so that it doesn't get into your mattress or your pillows. Sweeping, if you have carpet in your bedroom with a HEPA filter type vacuum cleaner, is very important. And if you can have a hard surface floor, really helps. Because the skin flakes get into the carpet, it's hard to get them out, the dust mites like those, and so they just grow in greater amounts.
And I think I know the answer to this, but you can't see dust mites to the naked eye, right?
Right. Okay. But they're nasty little creatures when you look at them through the microscope.
And so I kind of cut you off there. So we were talking about the other types of allergies with chemicals in the home or what is So what are some of the other ways that people might be seeing?
Well, with chemicals in the home, it can be an irritant, or some people develop a true allergy to them. So it can be a contact, like from makeup, cleaning products, some scented products, the plug-ins, which are the scented plug-ins.
They smell great.
Smell great, but can be an irritant, as well as they can accelerate allergies. Oh, wow. So they actually make allergies worse because they irritate the mucous membranes and can create allergic type symptoms. One of the good examples is formaldehyde, which was in different building products in the past. They've removed a lot of it now due to regulation, but that would set up a response that would then cause you to have allergies because it created an irritation of the mucous membranes. The allergens came in contact with those irritated areas and developed more of an allergic reaction or a sensitivity.
That's interesting. And then food allergies. I remember us talking last time a little bit about food allergies and thinking, oh, well, if you're drinking milk and have, a lactose intolerance, that might be the only issue you have with a milk allergy. But I remember you telling me a little bit about it has to do with the cow and maybe eating grass. Can you tell us more about kind of how everything is related in that sense?
Well, the relationship is that the cow eats the grass, the grass pollen and that comes through in the milk. And so if you're really, really grass sensitive, then you have to avoid dairy products because you just can't get rid of those antigens in there. Some of the different, like grasses, are cross-reactive or the same family as grains to some extent. And so if you're wheat sensitive from a food standpoint, then you may be grass sensitive or vice versa. So you have to look at the whole picture of what you're sensitive to from a pollen dust mold standpoint and from a food standpoint. Because if you're yeast sensitive, then that cross-reacts sometimes with the mold. Or if you're mold sensitive, then you have to watch the yeast and the yeast products, which is like brewer's yeast or baker's yeast, which are in either the fermented type beverages or also in the cooking, or also in the cooking world with pies, cakes, cookies, all those things that have baker's yeast in them.
Well, that's one reason to stay away from pies and cookies, huh?
The other one is calories. But
calories, yes. It's something I would never really think of and really correlate, I guess, that I would never, that would be a reason why I would be having an allergy to something. I'm going to check here really quickly to make sure we don't questions that we had before was, why would we suddenly develop an allergy to something that they've never been allergic to before in the past?
Well, it depends on what it is. Usually it has to do with extreme exposures to an item. So if you have a high pollen count and you have unusual exposure, like traveling down the road with the windows open during ragweed season, you get exposed about 10,000 times more pollen with the windows down and not having the air conditioner on. So a long exposure with someone that's set up to be sensitive or they have a higher allergic factor then can stimulate those allergies. The same way with some foods, eating foods repetitively can. Or if you're already sick and exposed to something like we were talking about with irritation of the mucous membranes, then that can predispose you to developing an allergy at that point.
That's interesting. So is peanut allergy follow that kind of rule, or is it one of its own?
Well, it's kind of one of its own in a sense, in that there's some probably genetic component to peanut allergy. Okay. Then you can develop allergies by having exposures, or with the food, sometimes people will have like a viral gastroenteritis and then eat a whole bunch of one food at that time. The defense mechanism in your intestinal tract is compromised with the virus, and then you absorb that food and actually develop an allergy to it. Because the gut normally has a protective mechanism whereby when you put like peanut in your mouth, it tells the rest of your gastrointestinal tract, here comes peanut. And
prepare.
Prepare, and it prepared and it doesn't absorb it. But if that mechanism doesn't work right, then you actually absorb the allergen part of it, and it creates the allergy.
So are allergies hereditary then?
They can be.
Okay.
They can be. And so if you have like one parent that's allergic, then the children may have allergies. If you have both parents are really allergic, then most likely the children will have some allergies to some things. And 40% of the population has allergies.
Wow.
So it's not uncommon out there. A lot of people just ignore it, or they take over-the-counter medicines and never really seek medical help for it until the symptoms get so bad that they say, I can't tolerate this, and then try to figure out what to do about it.
So are allergies curable?
They are. And the first step is avoidance, if possible, as we've been talking about. Then if you want to improve them and build up defense mechanisms, then you take allergy immunotherapy, which is the allergy shots. And they're small, exact doses of what you're sensitive to build up blocking antibodies and build up tolerance. Allergy medicine just covers up the symptoms. It doesn't help your body fight and build up tolerance to whatever you're allergic to.
I didn't realize that. Something my dad swears by, and you'll have to tell me if this is a wives' tale or real, and I wonder if he's watching right now. So sorry, Dad, I'm calling you out here. But he swears by a spoonful of honey of wherever he is located. You know, we grew up in this rural town in New Jersey, and he takes a spoonful of honey, and he says, the local honey, and he says if it's locally grown, my allergies are always better that season. Is that something that's true? Is that like building up that, immune system or immunity to whatever those allergens? Is that true?
It is.
Oh, there you go, Dad. You're verified there.
Well, what happens? The bees collect the pollen, and they of course make honey, and the pollen's in it. So if you get the right dose and don't overdose yourself with it, then you build up antibodies, blocking antibodies slowly with the honey. But a lot of times people take too much, and then it creates their allergies. So
oh, wow, so it's careful.
Yeah, you have to be careful, and the dose is important, and it will vary with individuals. I mean, he may be able to take a teaspoon, somebody else may be able to take a half a teaspoon, other people may be able to take a tablespoon, but on a repeated basis, then that will help build up tolerance.
But really, in theory, probably best to see a medical professional, right?
True. Yeah, and these are people that have milder sensitivities, but if you're having asthma, then you really need to seek help, or anaphylactic type reactions where you swell, get hives, itchy throat, difficulty breathing, and that's really important that you seek medical help.
Absolutely. Definitely some good advice. And we have a question here. So let's see. Tommy Strackhouse. Oh, my brother is watching. There you go. He says, is there a way to get rid of allergies stemming from almond or pitted fruits?
That's tough because usually it's avoidance that makes sense. There's some research out there looking at using immunotherapy, either drops or shots with foods to help decrease the reactivity. But that's still on the area of investigation, looking at it, but can be helpful in certain cases.
Oh, okay. So kind of recommend just staying away from them in general mostly.
Avoidance is the best thing. Now, you can't, it makes sense to get tested if you think that's what it is and see which ones are causing the problem. Pits come from different food families, and so one may not cross-react with the other one, or you may be reactive one and not the other one. So it makes sense to get tested and figure out what's going on exactly.
So what is a test for? You know, you kind of hear stories about pricking with needles or this or that. You know, what is an allergy test, and you know, what does it consist of? Well,
an allergy test consists of a very small dose of what you're sensitive to, and so that's called an antigen. And so you have antigen testing, and there's different methods of doing that. from a skin test standpoint, they now have prick test, and then they have intradermal test. The prick test is taking a group of allergens with a pricker device, and they test you either on your back or your arm. And if there is redness and swelling related to it, then that's a positive test. An intradermal test is more sensitive, and it's taking a small amount of the same antigen and then putting it under the skin or right in the intradermal, in the layers of skin, like a TB test, where it makes a little bump, a little welt, and then you see if that grows in size. And if it grows 2 millimeters, then that's a positive skin test. So that's the most sensitive way of doing it, and gives you the best results. A lot of times you'll be mold negative on prick test, but know you have trouble with mold, and you do intradermal test of mold, and it'll come up positive. And then there are delayed reactions that can occur to both foods and to like molds and pollens, where you're exposed today and feel bad tomorrow. So those are inflammatory responses that occur. So you may be out riding in the car with the top down, do just fine today, and then tomorrow you wake up just feeling horrible, eyes swollen, headache, that type of thing.
Sometimes I actually notice that with cats. I love all animals, but for some reason when I'm around cats, I'm perfectly fine, and then I either go home and it starts to flare up, or I wake up the next day and it's something like that. Is there a way I can combat that if I know I'm going to be someplace where there's a cat or anything like that?
Well, one of the things is get tested to see whether you're cat sensitive.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And if you are, then you can take allergy shots to help with it. If you know you're going to be around the cat, then pre-dose yourself with an antihistamine, a non-drowsy antihistamine before, and then take one afterwards. And if you're in a pollen situation, then be sure to immediately, when you get out of that situation, take a shower, get rid of the dander, and cats, it's dander that most people are sensitive to. And that way you aren't continually exposed to it. Change your clothes, because the cats get all over you.
Yeah, they do. Some other question that I actually had recently was, how do you tell really the difference between an allergies, or when you're getting allergies, and a cold? I was thinking about that the other day as I was getting some allergies. I was like, I wonder if a cold is coming on, but it ended up being just allergy. But is there a way to tell at the beginning when you're starting to feel that first sniffle?
There's some ways. You can't always, but most people know what they're allergic to. And so they can kind of tell whether they've been out in one of those situations. But the other situations, you don't. So typically, allergy reactions do not give you fever or chills type situation. They may make you feel tired and fatigued and congested and
itchy-eyed.
Itchy-eyed type thing. Now, that's not always true, because ragweed for years has been called hay fever.
I've heard hay fever.
Yeah. And so ragweed sensitivity is called hay fever, and actually people are really sensitive to it. When they get exposed, they can develop a fever with it. Yeah. And so that's, you can't always rely on those symptoms. But if you take an antihistamine and it really helps the symptoms, then it's most likely allergy, unless you start having nasal congestion that's green or yellow and running a fever, and then it's probably an infection. Now, during allergy season, it does flare up your mucous membranes, which decreases your defense mechanism for bacterial infections. So you can get a secondary bacterial infections from severe allergic type symptoms in some people, because their defense mechanism is not as healthy as it should be.
It's like a full body cycle, like everything, why things are happening. And that's really what a lot of what you do, right? Looking kind of at the big picture of things.
Exactly. So as we've been discussing, it's not really straightforward. You have to look at the whole picture in the individual, make sure you get a good history of what's gone on in the past, what they've done recently, where they live, where they work, what type of hobbies they do, because all these factors play into a person's health or their exposure to different environmental factors.
Okay. Well, I was noticing, actually, we have another question here. What is the best way to cure hay fever?
Well, the best way is to find out what you're sensitive to and then get on allergy shots.
Okay.
And so the allergy shots over a period of years, 3 to 5 years, really boost up your defense mechanisms, and a lot of times will take care of the allergies and you don't have a problem anymore.
I'm kind of curious, what is is hay fever or ragweed, is it a common, is it a pretty common allergy, or what are your most common allergies?
Well, ragweed is fairly common, and it's a fall allergy. It starts in August and then goes through frost. And a lot of people are sensitive to ragweed. Ragweed's in the south and the east, west of the Continental Divide. There is some ragweed, but it's a different ragweed. And so there's western ragweed and eastern ragweed, and so that varies with the exposure where you live type situation. But it is very common. Here in Texas, mountain cedar is real common because we have quite a bit of cedar trees, quite a few cedar trees, and they produce pollen. People are exposed to it. Because we don't have too much frost and winds, then mold is very common. Just the common molds can flare people up. So the weather will change. A weather front coming through, and then the next day a person feels bad, and they can't figure out why. But it's what they blew in and mainly is mold, unless it's during ragweed season, and then it's coming from other parts of the country too.
Really all related.
It is.
Yeah. Well, so is there anything else that you think people would really want to know or take away from this? Any big questions you guys got? Oh, hold on one second. Sarah says, helpful. I have a family member that has been miserable and will definitely tell them allergy shots could help. Are allergy shots, oh, she has a great question here. Are allergy shots okay for kids?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So there's different kind of doses for kids and adults?
But kids get allergy shots all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Perfect. Definitely a relief that, it's available.
Yeah, it is. It's just you have to have a good allergy tester and a parent that understands what's going on and help encourage the kids so they aren't afraid of what the situation is with the test. Right. And then there's drops you can use for treatment as well as shots. Okay. And so that works very well with kids.
Good. Okay. Well, like we were saying, anything else that you're really wanting people to know, or any common questions that you get? We have Elizabeth also, who is here sitting with us from Johnson Medical Associates. Any other questions you think that you really get when you hear talk allergies?
Well, I think the main message is if you're not feeling well and you aren't getting better, you're seeing the doctor, being treated, and not getting the response, then you really need to look at the allergic factor, because that can be kind of hidden and you don't realize it, because it may be a food that you eat every day that's causing problem. And the big foods are milk and grains or wheat.
I'm a big cheese fan, so I think that rather than give up cheese, I think if I ever, became suddenly allergic to dairy, that's kind of what I would do. So good advice. I like that.
So it makes sense to really get evaluated and to see. You can have your genetic factor evaluated. It's a simple blood test called IgE, as in Elizabeth. Normal people are 0 to 10. The lab, varying on the lab, will say, well, the population average is 0 to 110, 120, but 40% of the population is allergic. So that's kind of a false range that's there. And then you can have normal IgE and still have allergies to specific things. And then there are the delayed inflammatory responses that are not IgE mediated, but there's 6 types of allergy, and so there's 5 other ways to react besides just the IgE way.
Wow. Okay. So it's really kind of a all-inclusive. Let me make sure we're all good with questions here. Oh, hold on. We have another one. Janet says, why is it we didn't have things like severe peanut allergies when we were kids, but there are so many cases now?
Well, part of it is just knowing that they exist. Media information is so instant now, and it's promoted, and people are more aware of it. I think part of that. The other part of it is that we have more processed foods. Instead of years ago, we would eat just plain either corn, or you'd have rice or meat or that. Now you get so many processed foods with all these different things in it, including peanuts, that you get constantly exposed to it and can develop a sensitivity to it. And then the other part is just our immune systems are not as strong as they used to be.
Really?
In some ways. And so you build up allergies. And like we were talking about, some of it's genetic. So if our genetic pool is such that two allergic people have children, then their children are going to be more allergic. And we have that happen all the time.
So if let's say, like, if I'm pregnant down the road and I want my child to not have a peanut allergy, is there any way to combat that? Or is that kind of something that you'd have to, is that something you can answer right now?
Well, there's different thoughts on it. Yeah. Typically, if we know mom is allergic to something, we want her as healthy as possible during pregnancy. So mom needs to be on a diet. Avoiding those allergic factors. So hopefully that doesn't set up an allergic response in the baby. Now, if mom's breastfeeding and the baby's having problems like croup or colic or that, it may be what mom is eating that's upsetting the child's stomach and causing reactions. And so in that case, we've got to find out what the child's allergic to, but you put the mother on the diet. So a lot of times it's what we talked about, either grains or dairy or sometimes it's spicy foods, because peppers are an item that can upset gastrointestinal tracts.
Well, I don't really like peppers, so fine for me.
Well, the best thing is screen your mate before you get married. So yeah.
There you go. Okay, so don't get married unless you know exactly what they're allergic to, right?
Right. Well, they're advertising. Genetics now, 23andMe. I'm not sure whether they have a matchmaker for that or not.
Well, perfect. All right. It's definitely some amazing advice here, amazing information. Is there anything else you think people would want to know, Dr. Johnson?
I think we've covered a lot of it. Just be aware of what's around you, of what you're exposed to. And a lot of people can figure out cause and effect relationships. And if something doesn't appear right, say you're out in public and there's a bad odor, get away from it till you find out what it is. Because I've had people become really ill with chemical exposures that they thought, well, I shouldn't be here, but they stayed for whatever reason. So don't be bashful about it. Get away from whatever appears noxious to you or offensive until you figure out what's going on.
Use your gut, really.
Yeah, use your gut. And it's just like smoke inhalation. You can there's all kinds of things in smoke, and it affects your lungs. And if plastics are burning, it creates toxic substances, and you can die from that. So just be cautious of what you're using. If you're using products that read the label on what it is and follow the label, just like. Summer becoming here pretty quick, and we have mosquitoes, and everybody uses mosquito spray to ward off the mosquitoes and West Nile virus type problems. But pay attention to how it says it's to be used. Okay. It's typically not to be sprayed on skin, but sprayed on your clothes.
I always put it on my skin.
Well,
we have another question.
You absorb it, and it's a toxin.
Yeah, perfect. All right, let me see here. Oh, actually, okay, we just that one, but definitely good advice, and it kind of brings us to what we're going to be talking about in 2 weeks. Again, here at 1 o'clock, we're going to talk about toxicity. When it comes to mold or products in your home, basically just toxic. What might be toxic to you that you might not realize, right?
Exactly, and what toxicity really means from a daily aspect or clinical aspect and how it affects and manifests in you as the individuals.
Some of the stuff you're using every day in your home, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, home products. What are safer ones? There's many people that are sensitive to odors and fumes, and there's scent-free products that make sense to utilize in your home, as well as safer products.
All right. We're talking about that in 2 weeks at 1 o'clock here on Facebook with Dr. John. So we're going to be talking, like we said, a little bit about toxic stuff in your home that you really need to know about. So you can always comment here. You can ask your questions here, or you can send RNCN or Johnson Medical Associates, of course, a message, and we'll fire it up and have it ready for you next week. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Have a good one.